number D7, which is about reforming the way.
Sorry, would you please allow the Tánaiste to move the motion? Thank you.
I wish to move motion D7, which is a set of measures to reform the way in which the Dáil does its business. And if there was ever a case for this reform, I think the conduct of business here this morning makes it very adequately. The reform package that we're introducing today is essentially a set of common-sense measures to improve the way that the Dáil works. This House has two key functions: to hold the government to account and to enact and amend legislation. And we have to improve the way in which we do both of those things. The way we do our business here is based on a set of ideas and systems that have evolved since the 19th century. That process of evolution has now to take another step forward. Parliament is different from other workplaces, and the work that TDs do extends well beyond the formal sitting times for this House. But the Dáil can no longer work in a way which is so far removed from the experience of our fellow citizens. We have to change the way we work. We have to show a more timely capacity to hold the executive to account. We have to make our legislative process more inclusive and more timely, and we need not just to listen to other voices, but to show that we are listening. Over the past decade, the amount of resources available to individual TDs has been significantly increased. The staff complement and the research and library facilities have improved enormously compared to when I was first elected to the Dáil in 1989. But our structures and systems have not been reformed at the same pace. These changes that we are proposing today will require deeper and more considered engagement in the legislative process. Committees are not a platform for party political speeches and soundbite opportunities. They require considered effort and engagement if they are to work effectively. The measures that I am introducing to this House today are building on reforms already introduced over the past 2 years, such as an additional Leaders' Question on a Thursday, topical issues debates, Friday sittings so that TDs from both opposition and government benches can introduce their own bills, and reducing the Oireachtas committees by 9. The changes to standing orders today, which I am proposing here, will significantly enhance scrutiny of legislation, spending and policy, the capacity of TDs to hold the government to account, and will also open up the legislative process to new voices and ideas. For example, in future, all non-emergency legislation will be required to be sent to the relevant Oireachtas committee for that committee to examine it, debate it and consider it with the input of relevant experts if it so wishes. We have seen how this was used to positive effect, particularly when it comes to public confidence in the lawmaking process, with the Protection of Life During Pregnancy bill earlier this year. I know from my ministerial colleagues that they have often found this type of scrutiny of legislation before it proceeds to drafting to be particularly useful. It can catch anomalies or unintended consequences early, hence reducing the need for late amendments, and it can introduce new, previously unconsidered angles or ideas. Another positive change to how we do our business will be a significant role for Oireachtas committees in fiscal accountability. With the budget now in October, for the first time Oireachtas committees can consider departmental estimates before any money is spent, and not, as was previously the case, only after the fact. The new Dáil schedule will also extend sitting times, allowing for an increase in the time for debate, while the Dáil will now sit every second Friday to consider legislation put forward by TDs and by committee reports. And in order to ensure that TDs seeking to raise important issues under the new topical issues debate can get an effective answer to their questions, in future it must be a minister or a minister of state from a relevant department who takes that issue in the Dáil. Of course, improving the quality of our democracy is about more than what happens on the floor of the Dáil. It is also about the culture our politics operates in. which is why this government has introduced legislation to restore the Freedom of Information Act, whistleblowers legislation and legislation to end the regulation of to bring about the regulation of lobbying, as well as cutting political donations and effectively banning corporate donations. The Irish people, I believe, deserve a hard-working, efficient and modern Parliament, and these changes, which I am proposing today, taken together, are another step in the right direction.
We've got a list of speakers there.
And basically the average TD, like myself, is being excluded from that debate here today, and I just think that's totally inappropriate. I want to say that these decisions are very much, the leaders have decided it, and they've never really consulted with people like myself, and I object to that.
Deputy Paul Keogh.
Thank you very much, Ken Corley. Just let me remind the Deputy that we actually, in July of 2011, we had a full day's debate on Dáil reform. It was the first time actually we had a full debate ever in the House on Dáil reform. That was on the introduction of Dáil reform, and actually the leader of the Fianna Fáil party didn't even contribute to that debate on that day. So that was the interest that he had in Dáil reform as he was appointed leader of the Fianna Fáil party. So no parliament is perfect, and the process of parliamentary reform is always an ongoing one. For many TDs in this chamber who were elected before 2011, like myself, the changes introduced by this government to date have significantly enhanced the role of the TD. TDs now can draft their own legislation and have a debate on the Dáil, engage in pre-legislative review at committee stage, approach the Ken Corley if they are unhappy with the answer of a parliamentary question, and raise topical issues debates. These are just the first steps in the Dáil reform process. The programme for government outlined an ambitious agenda of Oireachtas reform to be introduced on a phased basis over the lifetime of this government. The number of Dáil sitting days has been significantly increased by reducing the length of the Dáil recess. The first phase of the Dáil reforms introduced in the summer of 2011 included an additional leaders' questions session on Thursdays, topical issues debates replaced by adjournment debates, Friday sittings for TDs to introduce their own bills, restructuring of Oireachtas committee system by reducing the number of committees from 25 to 16, and providing a system of pre-legislative review. In the summer of 2012, further reforms to the Oireachtas committee system streamlined the structure and allowed additional focus on areas such as jobs and agriculture. These new standing orders are the next phase of the Dáil reform programme. More public involvement in lawmaking, a pre-legislative stage before an Oireachtas committee will be a requirement for all non-emergency legislation. This will allow TDs to consult with experts, civic society groups and other citizens on proposed legislation before it is drafted. A minister who does not bring a bill to the committee for the pre-legislative stage will have to explain that on the floor of the Dáil. An annual outline of government priorities to the Dáil. The Taoiseach and Taoiseach will address the Dáil, setting out the government priorities on an annual basis. Each minister will also address the Dáil, setting out their department's plans for the future. Oireachtas committees a greater role in the budget process. Committees can review the stability programme update and report departments before the budget. For the first time, a Oireachtas committee can consider the budget process and the estimates before any money is spent. Measures to improve the legislative process. The new Dáil schedule will increase the length of daily sittings and the time available to debate legislation. The drafting enactment process will be modernised. These steps will result in the reduction in the number of guillotines. The Dáil will sit every second Friday to debate private members' bill and committee reports. This will allow more TDs to have their own bills debated in the Dáil and give committee reports more profile. The Minister or Minister of State from the relevant department will respond to topical issue debates. Where this does not happen, the TD can have it deferred until the Minister from that department is available when it will be given priority, or have it taken on the next day. The Deputy tabling the oral questions must be in the chamber when it is reached. The Deputy will be given a brief period to outline the question to the Minister's reply, before the Minister's reply. Opposition spokespersons will no longer nominate questions in the name of other TDs, but will have additional questions in their own name. At First stage, the proposer of a private member's bill will have 5 minutes to outline the purpose of the bill. At second stage, the chair or vice chair of the committee which considered the bill at pre-legislative stage shall have a speaking slot to report to the Dáil. At the end of the second stage debate, 45 minutes will be allowed for concluding remarks by the deputies chosen by the Ceann Comhairle who have previously spoken on that debate. A minister will report to the Oireachtas Committee within 12 months of enactment to all legislation. The Dáil Reform Subcommittee met on 6 occasions in the last 12 months to consider these phased Dáil reforms. Dáil reform is an ongoing process and work has already started on the next phase. I look forward to working closely with members opposite regarding future reforms. Each TD in the Chamber has an interest in this area, and I am happy to consider any suggestions for Dáil reform from any individual TD or party or grouping. It is in all our interests and the interest of the Irish people that we have a modern reform Dáil.
Thank you.